Good evening. This will be a very short lecture, probably not more than 15 or 20 minutes. But I think I'm trying to make some sense of this topic called semantics. So as you know, semantics is the study of meaning. So what exactly is meaning? It's a very tricky business, as some of you know, to talk about the meaning of an utterance, meaning of a word, the meaning of a sentence. Because most people have a problem in identifying meaning. Let us say, okay, in understanding sentences. Okay, so this is actually the case where an entire film sequence can be one of trying to make sense of what somebody else says. Okay, I say something, you don't get it. You say something, I don't get it. But one must realize that this is fundamental to human civilization. So if you don't know what another person is speaking about, then what is the point? How do you carry on with your life? Okay, so we do know that there is a consensus in society about what an utterance means. Okay, so this is true. This is how it was when language originated. So I think I told you about the origin of language, how basically scientists have discovered that language originated when people needed faster and precise communication. So they can't afford to make mistakes. They can't afford to be misunderstood when somebody listens to you and you're trying to communicate something. So this is there basically, a consensus in society whereby an utterance is said to mean something, right? So there is no change there. But this is a big but, as you would realize. As civilization expanded, as societies became larger, as different communities existed side by side, as the kind of social unity which once was imposed upon people by authoritarian regimes collapsed. When societies became more democratic, when there were people who carried on different occupations, when there were people who carried on different systems of beliefs. So, plurality in society is one reason why there is confusion of meaning. So if you have looked up a book called Alice in Wonderland, most of you have read it in your childhood or in early adolescence, right? So one particular character in the novel says, I think it was a rabbit. The rabbit says, when I say something, I want it to mean exactly what I want it to mean. So this is interesting. You say something, you insist that everybody should take it in your sense. We know that this is not possible. Language is a social phenomenon, construct. So when you say something, you have to stand by the rules of the language, social rules of the language. It can be rules, it can be practices, conventions. Okay. Now, having said this, we must also realize that words do not have fixed meanings. A philosopher like Derrida would immediately throw away this idea that a word has a fixed meaning. Okay, he would say it goes on changing. You can't assign a particular meaning to a word and expect it to remain so for years. You don't do that. You can try this with a dictionary. The nearest dictionary that you can get hold of and look at how a particular word is defined in a dictionary, and then try to locate this particular definition in discourse. Look up the net, and immediately you will find that a number of other significations have also come in, right? So this is what happens. all the time. So in my childhood, if somebody said, "Adu poliya," what does it mean? It meant that it is worthless. Poliyan, poker. But today, look at how the word has undergone a transformation of meaning. You don't say something is worthless. You don't mean something is worthless when you say "Adu poliyan." You mean that it's wonderful. Okay. It's great. Okay, smashing, whatever you want to take, poliyan. And the closely allied word polichu. Okay. So this is a new. The use of the word as a verb, polikyuga, in the sense of making a great success of something. Okay. Doing something wonderful. Okay. Doing something extraordinary. All these senses come in. So we also think of something like the primary meaning of a word. Or when I talk about meaning, I mean meaning in a general way, not simply the meaning of words. Yeah, that's there, but the meaning of sentences. So when I say, "Ningal as a assignment submit cheyidilla," there are two kinds of meaning. One, the factual meaning, a assignment submit cheyidilla. The other meaning, which is the implied meaning of the connotative meaning, is called connotative meaning. Opposite is denotative or referential meaning, which simply tells you about the facts. Connotative meaning is assignment submit cheyanulla samayokka kazhinju, aarum submit cheyidilla. So this kind of very obvious changes of senses. Okay. When it is taken in one way, it means something. When it is taken in another way, it means something. I'll send you a small PDF file. I'm not exactly following that, but I am referring to some of the things that it's a difficult file. There are lots of technical things which you are not required to know. But take this referential meaning, connotative meaning, the kind of meaning I talked about. Take Chomsky's idea of deep structure and surface structure. Deep structure is the inner or deeper layer of meaning which the surface structure does not reflect. Okay. So when you say, there are many examples that Chomsky gave. Old men and women. Does it mean that both men and women are old, or only the men are old? So that can be resolved by looking at the underlying structure, which would be something like old men and old women. Okay, that would be the underlying structure. Okay, or a sentence given in this PDF file. He spotted the hunter with a telescope. This is a normal thing, but when you say this sentence, it can also mean that I spotted the person by looking through a telescope, and also I spotted a person who held a telescope in his hands. Two senses. So as I said, this is the reason why senses and signification has changed. Society has become very complex. You don't go with one-to-one senses. It changes. Okay, depending upon the circumstance. That is a big thing. Okay, the circumstances. Okay, what something can mean in a different context. Yeah, that we know already. What, for example, a statement like the President of the Union was thoroughly inefficient. Okay, this can even be taken as a sarcastic comment. So suppose the President of the Union is expected to pay, to engage contractors from whom he takes bribes. Okay, so the opposition leader can use the sentence ironically. Okay. So the party follows the same route. And they want to appoint certain contractors and take bribes from them. Whereas this president does not do that. He's an honest president. So this is what the opposition member is referring to. So their efficiency means not efficiency in work, but following certain expected practices. കൈക്കൂലി വാങ്ങണം, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ സ്വന്തക്കാരെ നിയമിക്കണം. So by saying that the president is not efficient, the opposition leader means exactly the opposite. Okay. So this is how meanings are derived in society. Okay. Now the question of referential and connotative meaning. Very popular during the days of new criticism. New criticism as a literary movement often talked about this and said that literature often relied upon connotative meaning. It was not the denotative meaning that poets used or readers read. Okay. Thou was born for immortality. Thou was not born for happiness. Okay. A statement a poet makes, where the meaning is not that the bird is not born for happiness. It's something else. Okay. The bird is here a representative of a human, an individual. Right, like that. So, denotative meaning and connotative meaning was also considered in literature. So this is what we talk about when we mean meaning. Okay. And there are other things involved when we discuss meaning. For example, when we talk about what a sentence means, generally we take its dictionary meaning without looking at the context. But the context is not only important, the context sometimes determines the meaning, as we saw in these examples which we just took up. Okay. Now, what people often say is that language does not have a logic, which is not true. A language, of course, has a logic. It is not the same kind of logic that you find elsewhere. You know about the joke. I love the professor. The professor loves his son. Therefore, I love the professor's son. As if love is something which is contagious. Okay. If it is active between two persons, if you come into contact with one, you also develop a kind of attraction for the other person also. So such jokes are abound in literature. So you apply one form of logic when you talk about something, but in language also there is logic. Only thing is you must be able to find the logic, okay, which a person like Chomsky did when he talked about deep structure and surface structure. Sometimes the ambiguity of a sentence can be clarified when you do what is called immediate constituent analysis. I'll come to that when I discuss Chomsky. So immediate constituent analysis means cutting a sentence into pieces. And as I did with the sentence, or with the phrase, all men and women. So if you cut at all, the adjective applies to men and women. But if you cut at men, the women are excluded. All men and women. Okay. So you have plenty of other categories, like one I already mentioned, connotation, interpretation, a big thing. People discuss the meanings of poems, what a poem means, what Sylvia Plath means in a poem like Daddy. what Ted Hughes means in a poem like Crow, roasting, right? So interpretation is a big thing. By interpreting an utterance, what you do is you look at a sentence on the basis of extraneous factors. Context I've already mentioned. A sentence can mean something in a particular context and something else in another context. Here we are talking about the interpretation of a sentence on the basis of extra linguistic evidence. Okay, somebody says something and you interpret that. Okay, and even when you don't have the speaker before you, the poet is not before you, the poet is somewhere else, but you interpret the sentence. You interpret the sentence to mean something else. I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed. Okay, a perfectly grammatical sentence from Shelley. But you interpret it to mean that it's not that the poet falls on the thorns of life, but the poet is always thinking about his personal problems. Okay, there is a large amount of self-love in this line. If this is interpretation, what exactly a poem means. Okay, what did Christ mean when he said, "This is my flesh, this is my blood, partake it," etc., etc. Interpretation. So interpretation is an advanced form of making meaning. Okay, you go beyond your linguistic data. You go to the universe of discourse, the world in which this utterance was made. Okay, and and the nature of the person who makes this utterance. So these are large issues. I am not going into them. So let us look at some very common issues. These are simple issues. You don't have to worry much about it. One is how you look at the senses of words. Okay. So one of the first things that you talk about when you discuss meaning is similarity or identity of meaning. So a particular property of languages is what is called entailment. So entailment, this file I sent you defines entailment. I'll first give you examples, then talk about it. Here's a sentence which the PDF file gives you. I'll give you another sentence after quoting this sentence. Max managed to finish Infinite Jest. J-E-S-T. Infinite Jest is probably the name of a novel. Okay. Then sentence number 2. Max finished Infinite Jest. Okay. So entailment means if one statement is true, the other statement is also true. Okay. So A entails B. Max managed to finish Infinite Jest. Entails Max finished Infinite Jest. Not quite often this entailment occurs only one way. I'll give you another sentence. Okay. The students finally decided to go for an excursion. Okay. The students decided to go for an excursion. The students finally decided to go for an excursion. 2. The students decided to go for. Finally is missing. Or the students resolved, you change the word, to go for an excursion. So if the first sentence is true, the second sentence is also true. Okay. This is the point of entailment, right? Where the truth value of two sentences are linked by meaning. Okay. That means there is definitely a similarity or cross linking between decided to go or finally decided to go. That's all. Now, the other example, which is given in the text, I'll show you. Yeah. The forest officer saw that the thing in the cage was a tiger. Okay. Why not? This often happens. The forest officer saw that, I'll change the sentence. The forest officer saw that there was a tiger in the cage. Forest officer saw there was an animal in the cage. Okay. Now, if the first sentence is true, the second sentence is definitely true, because the tiger is an animal. Right. So what you say is that the first sentence entails the second sentence. Okay. But if you change it a little, the forest officer saw that there was a tiger in the cage. Right. The forest officer saw that there was something in the cage. Not necessarily. Perhaps by extension you can say, you can call the animal a thing. I'll give you a different example. Okay. The forest officer saw that there was a tiger in the cage. Sentence number 1. The forest officer saw that there was an object in the cage. So these two sentences do not have the same relation, because you don't call a tiger an object, right? So this relationship immediately takes us to the next discussion on meaning. So this property is called entailment. Two sentences deemed to be true on the basis of the fact that if the first sentence is true, the second sentence is also true. Okay, so we discussed the relationship between tiger and animal. Okay, now there is a relationship between the two. The animal is the bigger word. What do you call it? You call it the superordinate. Okay, so ordination has something to do with classification. You classify things into various groups or categories. Okay, so the tiger is an animal. So the larger category is animal, right? So the tiger is an animal. Therefore, those two sentences which talked about a tiger in the cage and an animal in the cage have this relationship of entailment. Okay. Now, think of the sentences in reverse. The forest officer saw there was an animal in the cage, and the forest officer saw there was a tiger in the cage. Here the first sentence, if the first sentence is true, the second sentence need not be true. So A cannot entail B. Did you get it? So this is how we look at how meaning is made in classifications. Right. Now, let's go to another interesting category. Let's move on from entailment to what is called hyponymy. So in hyponymy, the same kind of principle holds. Tiger is a hyponym of animal. Animal is a superordinate of tiger. And both these words can be hyponyms of, in stages, hierarchical hyponyms of the word being, something that is alive, being. Some people call it creature, C-R-E-A-T-U-R-E. But creature has a problem, which we don't realize. Only people who believe in God can say creature, because it means that somebody created it. As in William Blake's poem, little lamb, who made thee? I shall tell you who made thee. this, that couplet from Blake's poem. So a creature requires a creator. Okay, fine, no problem there. But a being is a neutral term, just something that is alive. An animal is alive, a tiger is alive, and a number of other things. A plant is alive, being. A human being is alive. So being is a superordinate of what? Animal, tiger, lamb, bird, all those things which you can think of. They are hyponyms of animal or hyponyms of being. Okay. Now, hyponymy is a property of language. There are a number of words which function as hyponyms. Okay. Now, moving on from here, we come to the principle of antonymy. I think I should have started off with synonymy, but let us look at antonymy first. Antonymy is the can be defined as the function of giving opposite meanings. Two terms which give opposite meaning, but there are a number of problems here. Okay, for example, you can there is a joke, a poem by Chamanachako, of a teacher who taught his students that Muslim was the opposite of Hindu. So such jokes abound in our culture. So when you said something is the opposite of something else, it is always relative. Okay. Even take black and white. Are they opposites? I'm not very sure. Okay. What is black need not be white. What is not black need not be white. What is not white need not be black. So when you say something like, this is a very short boy that you find at the bus stop. Okay. And you can also say, there is a tall boy or there is a tall girl at the bus stop. Tall. Short opposite tall. Okay. Now, can you say that that boy is not tall? Does it mean that the boy is short? No. If the boy is not tall, it doesn't mean that he is short or the girl is short. It simply means that the girl or the boy is not short or long. Because the boy who is not short need not be a tall boy. It can be of medium height. So in positing antonymies, what we call opposite, we often learn to do that. That is why in recent thinking, people ask us to abandon this concept of binary. Even in gender, what is male is not female. Okay, agreed. Okay, but the opposite of male is not female. Okay, there are other categories. There are transgenders. Okay, so antonymy is always a problem, right? Okay, this positing of opposites, clear-cut opposites. So remember, this is not a problem of language. This is a problem of, if you call it a problem, it is not. It's a problem of our life, how our life is constructed, right? So you have something which is not short, but not tall. Okay, it can be of medium height. Something that is old, which is definitely not new, but something that is not new need not be old in that sense. Okay, right. It can be not very new, but it need not be old. So there are a large number of words, and how you decide upon positing opposites. In better English, it is called counterpoising. Okay. So if you are not black, you are white. If you are not a believer, you are an atheist. So this kind of thing. And in fact, there is a category of people who are called agnostics, who are not believers, but who don't say that they don't think God exists. They say, I don't know. They are called agnostics. So the positing of opposites, antonyms, is also problematic. So first, the idea of superordination and hyponymy. Then the idea of antonymy, getting opposites, positing opposites. You try this with any number of words in Malayalam. Okay. And certain words which don't have opposites, like in Chemman and Chakos example. So Muslim is not the opposite of Hindu. No way. They are two different categories. One is not the opposite of the other. Okay. So in appropriate context, something can be the opposite of the other. Ad hoc opposites. Okay. So if you have a place where both only tea and coffee are served, if the waiter asks you what you want and you hesitate, and the waiter asks again, is it tea, sir? You say no. Then obviously the waiter will think it's coffee. Whereas you can say that you don't need both. So this is a fundamental problem. Positing antonyms. Okay. Now, the next thing, identity of meaning or synonymy. This is even trickier, because there are very few perfect synonyms where you can replace one word for the other in all contexts. No. If you say small is the opposite of big, you can't small and little are synonyms. You don't use the synonyms in the same way in all contexts. Okay, you don't say something like a little bit of advice for you. Okay, which is not the same thing as a small bit of advice for you. Okay, a little sapling is not the same thing as a small sapling. Okay, a large mountain is not the same thing as, let us say, a large tract of land is not the same thing as a big tract of land. So on. And what appears to be synonyms are only words with similar but not exact sameness of meaning. Okay. And of course, so there are examples given here of words like, horse and a steed. A steed is actually a male horse. Okay. And it's never described as weak because they are racing horses. Okay. But if you say, I saw him riding the horse racing, you don't say steed racing or stallion racing. A stallion or a steed is a male horse. Do you say? So I saw him ride the horse right at the front. You say. You can also say, I saw him ride the steed right at the front. Steed or stallion also means horse, but a male horse. So in this particular instance, it functions as a synonym. Words with the same meaning. But you know that these two words are not exactly the same. Always differences in shades of meaning. So we discussed these three important properties in semantics. One, entailment. Four properties. Entailment. Hyponymy. 3, synonymy. 4, antonymy. 4 important properties of semantics at the word level. And we also looked at those aspects of meaning which are related to sentences. How you take a sentence to mean what you either want it to mean or what you gather it to mean. So among all the different aspects of language, semantics is probably the most tricky one. But don't panic, because we have done sociolinguistics. We know what sociolinguistics is. Sociolinguistics is what how language functions in society. So semantics is right at the center of sociolinguistics. When we also have looked at things like register, how a banana means something very different in football from what it means in ordinary life. Register. Okay. A large number of words which, when they are used in particular social contexts, mean certain very definite things which are completely absent in other discourses. So when you talk about meaning, remember this meaning is actually, strictly speaking, a socio-linguistic phenomenon. Quite always. Okay. You have constructed your language in a certain way over thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, if you look at the first language spoken in the world. So what you are doing is you are trying to make sense of how meanings are constructed within the language. And you also have what are called semantic domains or zones. Okay, a zone which has a number of connected words. Like when we talk about love. Okay, you have love, affection, consideration, attraction. A large number of words which point to a certain domain. Okay, democracy, consensus. Okay, discussion. Okay, autonomy, freedom. So these are semantic domains, areas in which certain words function as part of a particular discourse. Okay, you can think of football, for example, corner kicks, okay, indirect kicks, penalty kicks, throw-ins, some of which make sense only in football. Throw in. Okay, I don't think there is any other domain in which it is used. Throw in. Okay, free kick. Again, it's not that somebody kicks you for free. It makes sense only in football, right? Over, O-V-E-R, as a noun in cricket, so on. So this is how basically you try to come to grips with this aspect of language called semantics. So I have given you the basics, how semantics can be an interesting area of study. And so when you look up more on semantics, someone among you might be interested in doing research on semantics. Quite possible. Semantics is a very interesting subject, right? So hoping that one of you will do it ultimately. Of course, I don't know if I'll learn about your doing it. I'll be retiring next year. But I think it's a very interesting subject. Okay, bye.